The alarms rang through orbital station Horizon 7 like angry bells. Park Do-yeon looked up from his welding work and wiped the sweat from his forehead. Through the large windows of the repair bay, he could see them coming. 12 massive ships, each one shaped like a sleeping dragon, moved slowly toward the station. Their dark metal bodies glowed with orange fire from within. The Dracori had arrived. Do-yeon had heard stories about them. Everyone had. They were an ancient species, older than human civilization by thousands of years. They looked like dragons from old Earth legends, standing on two legs with scales covering their bodies and wings folded against their backs. They ruled over 40 star systems and viewed humans as little more than useful workers. The station commander's voice came through every speaker. All repair crews were ordered to prepare for emergency work. The Dracori flagship had taken damage in a battle. They needed human hands to fix it. Do-yeon sighed and began packing his tools. He walked to the small room near the repair bay where his daughter Suri was playing with building blocks. She was 8 years old, with bright eyes and hair tied in two small ponytails. Her mother had died giving birth to her, and Do-yeon had raised her alone ever since. "Suri, I have work to do," he said softly. "The childcare center is full today. You will have to come with me." Suri jumped up happily. She loved watching her father work. "Will there be aliens?" she asked. "Yes, but you must stay close to me. These aliens are very important and very dangerous. Do you understand?" Suri nodded, though her eyes were filled with excitement rather than fear. An hour later, Do-yeon stood inside the Dracori flagship. The ship was enormous. The hallways were wide enough for creatures twice the size of humans. The walls were decorated with gold patterns that showed battles and conquests. Everything smelled like smoke and old metal. Dracori warriors walked past him without looking down. They were each over 3 meters tall, covered in scales of red and black. Their yellow eyes glowed in the dim light. Do-yeon kept his head low and his daughter's hand tight in his grip. They reached the secondary engine room. The damage was bad. An explosion had torn through several power lines and cracked the main cooling system. It would take days to fix. Do-yeon set up his workstation and began examining the damage. Suri sat on a metal box nearby, swinging her legs and watching him work. For an hour, everything was peaceful. Then Suri saw a butterfly. At least it looked like a butterfly. It was a small cleaning drone, designed to look pretty while it collected dust from the air. It floated past Suri, glowing with soft blue light. "Pretty," Suri whispered. She slid off the box and followed it. Do-yeon did not notice. He was deep inside a maintenance tunnel, reconnecting power cables. Suri followed the drone down one hallway, then another. The ship was like a maze, and soon she had no idea where she was. The drone disappeared through a small vent, and Suri found herself alone in a dark corridor. She was not scared. Suri had never been scared of much. Her father always said she had her mother's brave heart. Then she heard crying. It was soft, like someone trying very hard not to make noise. Suri walked toward the sound. She turned a corner and found a small garden room. Plants with silver leaves grew from golden pots. A fountain made of crystal sat in the center, though no water flowed through it. And there, sitting behind the fountain, was a dragon girl. She was small for a Dracori, only a little taller than Suri. Her scales were pale gold, almost white, and her eyes were bright purple. Small horns curved back from her head, and tiny wings pressed flat against her back. She wore a dress made of red silk with jewels sewn into it. She was crying. Suri walked closer. "Hello," she said. The dragon girl gasped and jumped back. Her claws scraped against the floor. "Who are you? How did you get in here? This area is forbidden." "I followed a butterfly," Suri said simply. "Why are you crying?" The dragon girl stared at her. No one had ever asked her that question before. Servants asked if she needed anything. Guards asked if she was safe. Teachers asked if she understood her lessons. but no one had ever asked why she was sad. "I am not crying," she said, wiping her eyes quickly. "Yes, you are. It is okay. I cry sometimes too." Suri reached into her pocket and pulled out a small candy bar. It was wrapped in colorful paper. "Do you want some chocolate? It makes me feel better when I am sad." The dragon girl looked at the candy like it was a strange artifact from another world. "What is chocolate?" "You do not know chocolate." Suri's eyes went wide. "It is the best thing ever. Here, try it." She held out the candy bar. The dragon girl hesitated for a long moment. Then slowly, she reached out and took it. Her claws were sharp, but she held the candy gently like it was something precious. She bit into it. Her purple eyes went wide. This is wonderful," she whispered. Suri smiled. "I am Suri. What is your name?" "I am Nira, Princess Nira of the Dracorai Dominion." "Oh, that sounds important." Suri sat down on the floor, crossing her legs. "Why were you crying, Princess Nira?" Nira looked down at the half-eaten chocolate bar. "I am alone," she said quietly. "I am always alone. Everyone bows to me. Everyone fears me, but no one just talks to me. No one asks me about my day. No one shares chocolate with me." Suri tilted her head. "That sounds very sad. I would be sad too." Before Nira could respond, a loud voice echoed through the corridor. "Suri, Suri, where are you?" "That is my father," Suri said, standing up. "I should go. He worries about me a lot." She turned to leave, but Nira grabbed her sleeve. "Wait, will you? Will you come back?" Suri smiled brightly. "Sure, I will bring more chocolate next time." Then she ran toward her father's voice, leaving Nira alone in the garden with a chocolate bar and a feeling she had never experienced before. Hope. Doyun found Suri at the end of the corridor. He knelt down and grabbed her shoulders, checking for injuries. "Suri, you cannot wander off like that. This ship is dangerous." "I am sorry, father. I followed a butterfly." Doyun sighed. He could never stay angry at her for long. He wiped a smudge of engine grease from her cheek with gentle fingers. "You must promise to stay with me, okay? I cannot lose you." "I promise," Suri said. He picked her up and carried her back to the engine room. Neither of them noticed the small figure watching from the shadows. Princess Nira had followed quietly. She watched how the human father held his daughter. She watched how he touched her face so softly, like she was made of glass. She watched how he kissed the top of her head before setting her down. Nira had never been held like that. Her mother, the Empress, had never kissed her, had never touched her face with gentle hands, had never looked at her with such warm eyes. Something stirred in Nira's chest, something painful and beautiful at the same time. She did not know what it was called. Humans called it longing. And from that moment on, she could not stop watching. For 3 days, Princess Nira became a shadow. She followed the human mechanic and his daughter everywhere, hiding behind pillars and in dark corners. The ship was large enough that no one noticed a small princess moving quietly through the halls. The guards thought she was in her chambers. The servants did not dare look for her. And Nira watched. She watched how Park Do-yeon woke up early every morning in the small room the station had given him. She watched through a tiny window as he made breakfast for Suri before she was even awake. He cooked simple things, eggs and rice and soup, but he always made it look nice on the plate, arranging the food in the shape of a smiling face. She watched him write small notes on paper and slip them into Suri's lunch bag. Nira could not read human writing well, but she asked a translation device to tell her what they said. "I am proud of you. Have a good day, my little star. I love you more than all the galaxies." No one had ever written her notes like that. She watched him work on the engine repairs with steady hands. Other workers rushed and complained. Do-yeon worked quietly, patiently, checking every connection twice. When Suri asked him questions, he always stopped to answer her, no matter how busy he was. "Father, why is the sky black in space?" Because there is no air to catch the light, little one. Father, do stars ever get tired of shining? Never. They shine because that is what they are meant to do, just like you are meant to shine. Neera pressed her claws against her chest. These conversations were so simple, so small, but they felt more precious than all the gold in her mother's treasury. On the second day, she saw something that made her heart stop. A Dracorai warrior was walking through the repair bay. He was large, even by Dracorai standards, with black scales and a scar across his face. He stopped next to Doyun and looked down at him with disgust. "Human," the warrior growled. "You work slowly, like all your weak species." Doyun did not look up. He continued reconnecting a power cable. "The work will be done on time. You should bow when speaking to a Dracorai warrior." Suri, who was sitting nearby, looked scared, but Doyun calmly set down his tool and stood up. He did not bow. He looked at the warrior's chest, since the warrior's face was too high to meet. "I show respect through my work," Doyun said quietly. "That is the human way." The warrior laughed, a harsh and ugly sound. "Your way means nothing. You are tools, nothing more." He walked away, still laughing. Suri ran to her father and hugged his leg. "Father, that dragon was mean." Doyun knelt down and smoothed her hair. "Yes, he was. But do you know something, Suri? A person's worth is not measured by their title. It is measured by how they treat others. That dragon may be a great warrior, but he is not a great person." "I think you are a great person, father." Doyun smiled and kissed her forehead. "And I think you are the greatest person in the whole universe." Neera, watching from behind a stack of metal crates, felt something wet on her face. She touched her cheek and realized she was crying. She did not fully understand why. Later that night, Neera followed Doyun back to his small room on the station. She found a ventilation shaft that let her see inside. It was wrong to spy like this. She knew it was wrong, but she could not stop herself. The room was tiny, just 2 beds, a small table, and a cooking unit. But Doyun had covered the walls with drawings, colorful pictures that Suri had made. A yellow sun, a purple flower, a man and a little girl holding hands. Doyun sat on the edge of Suri's bed and opened a book. "What story do you want tonight?" "The one about the princess who saves the kingdom." "Again, we have read that one 100 times." "I like it. The princess is brave like me." Doyun laughed softly and began reading. His voice was gentle, changing tones for different characters. He made Suri laugh with silly voices. When the story got scary, he held her hand. When the story ended, Suri was almost asleep. Doyun pulled the blanket up to her chin. "Father," she mumbled, "do you think Mother can see me from heaven?" Doyun was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Yes, my love, she sees you every day, and she is so proud of you." "Do you miss her?" "Every moment, but she gave me you, and that makes every day worth living." Suri closed her eyes and smiled. "I love you, Father. I love you more, little star, more than all the galaxies." He kissed her forehead and turned off the light. Neera crawled out of the ventilation shaft and sat in the dark hallway. Her hands were shaking. Her chest felt like it was on fire. She had learned many things in her 200 years of life. She had learned politics and warfare. She had learned how to speak 5 languages and command armies, but no one had ever taught her what love looked like. Now she knew. The next morning, a servant came to Neera's chambers with a message. The Empress wished to see her immediately. Neera walked through the long corridors of the flagship until she reached the throne room. Her mother sat on a chair made of black crystal, flames dancing around its edges. Empress Velora was tall and terrifying, with scales as dark as space and eyes like molten gold. She had ruled the Dracorai dominion for 3,000 years. She had never once told Neera that she loved her. "Daughter," the Empress said, her voice cold and powerful, "you are approaching your flame maturity. In 100 years you will be an adult. The ceremonies must begin now." Nira bowed low. Yes, mother. The first ceremony is the selection. You must choose a sire guardian, a male who will guide you through your transition into adulthood. This is tradition. This is law. The Empress waved her claw and 12 holographic images appeared in the air. 12 Dracorai warlords. Each one was powerful. Each one was brutal. Each one would bring political advantages to the throne. These are your candidates, the Empress said. All of them are approved. You will choose one at the ceremony tomorrow. Nira looked at the images. She saw cold eyes and sharp teeth. She saw warriors who had burned planets and slaughtered millions. She saw power and cruelty and nothing else. None of them would ever pack her lunch with a note inside. None of them would ever read her stories at night. None of them would ever call her their little star. I understand, mother, Nira said. But in her heart, she had already made a different choice. That night, Nira returned to watch Doyun and Suri one more time. She saw Doyun give up half his dinner so Suri could have more. She saw him mend a tear in Suri's favorite dress with careful stitches. She saw him carry her to bed when she fell asleep at the table. And Nira made her decision. She did not want a warlord. She did not want a politician. She did not want power or alliances or military strength. She wanted someone who would love her. Tomorrow she would shock the entire Dracorai dominion. Tomorrow she would change the course of history. Tomorrow she would choose the human mechanic. The ceremony hall was filled with fire. Great pillars of flame rose from the floor, casting orange light across the faces of thousands of Dracorai. Warriors and nobles had come from across the dominion to witness the selection. It was an ancient tradition, unchanged for 10,000 years. A princess would choose her sire guardian, and through that choice, she would declare her values to the empire. Empress Velora sat upon her throne at the head of the hall. Her dark scales reflected the flames like mirrors. Beside her stood the 12 warlord candidates, each one wearing ceremonial armor made of gold and gems. In the gallery above, a small group of humans watched nervously. Station Commander Yuri had been invited as a diplomatic gesture. Park Do-yeon stood among the repair crew, holding Suri's hand tightly. He did not know why they had been asked to attend. He only knew that he wanted to leave as soon as possible. Trumpets made of dragon bone sounded through the hall. The crowd fell silent. Princess Nira walked through the great doors. She wore a dress of pure white silk, and a crown of silver flames sat upon her head. She looked small and young among so many giants. But her steps did not shake. Her eyes did not look down. She walked until she stood before her mother's throne. Then she bowed. Princess Nira of the Dracorai Dominion, the Empress announced, her voice echoing like thunder. Today you begin your journey toward flame maturity. You must choose a sire guardian to guide you. Present your selection. Nira stood straight. She looked at the 12 warlords beside her mother. Each one stared back at her with hungry eyes. They wanted the power that would come from being chosen. They wanted access to the royal family. They did not want her. No one ever wanted her, just what she represented. Except for one person. I have made my choice, Nira said. Her voice was clear and strong. The Empress nodded. Speak the name. Nira turned. She turned away from the warlords, away from the throne. She faced the gallery where the humans stood. She raised her claw and pointed directly at Park Do-yeon. I choose the human, she said. I choose Park Do-yeon as my sire guardian. The hall exploded. Warlords roared in fury. Nobles shouted in disbelief. Warriors drew their swords, unsure of what to do. The flames on the pillars seemed to grow higher, fed by the rage of 1,000 Dracorai. In the gallery, Do-yeon felt his heart stop. He pulled Suri behind him, shielding her with his body. What is happening? He whispered. Commander Yuri grabbed his shoulder. This is bad. This is very, very bad. Empress Velora rose from her throne. The entire hall fell silent in an instant. Her golden eyes burned with cold fire as she looked at her daughter. "What did you say?" she asked, her voice quiet but deadly. Nira did not look away. "I said I choose the human, mother. I choose Park Do-yeon." "That is not possible. A human cannot be a sire guardian. They are beneath us. They are tools, workers, nothing more." "The law does not say that." The Empress's eyes narrowed. "What law?" "The law of the first flame, written by our ancestors 10,000 years ago. It states that a princess's selection cannot be overruled by anyone, not even the Empress. And it does not say the chosen one must be Dracorai." Whispers spread through the crowd. The old priests who guarded the ancient texts looked at each other nervously. They knew Nira was right. The law had been written to prevent political manipulation. No one had ever imagined a princess would choose an alien. But the law was clear. Empress Velora's claws dug into the armrests of her throne. "You would dishonor our traditions for a primitive creature." "I would honor the true meaning of our traditions," Nira replied. "A sire guardian is supposed to teach and protect, to guide with wisdom and love. I have watched Park Do-yeon for 3 days. I have seen how he treats his daughter. He is kind. He is patient. He loves without expecting anything in return. That is what I want. That is what I choose." The hall was silent. No one had ever spoken to the Empress this way. No one had ever dared. Velora turned her gaze to Do-yeon, who still stood frozen in the gallery. "Bring the human forward," she commanded. Guards grabbed Do-yeon's arms and pulled him from the gallery. He tried to hold on to Suri, but she was taken from him and held by another guard. "Father!" she screamed. "It is okay, Suri," he called back. "I will be okay." He was thrown to his knees before the throne. The heat from the flames was painful against his skin. He looked up at the enormous dragon who ruled an empire. "Human," the Empress said, "my daughter has made a foolish choice. You will refuse her. You will say you are not worthy, and this madness will end." Do-yeon looked at Nira. She stood nearby, still wearing her white dress and silver crown. But now he saw what he had not seen before. He saw the loneliness in her eyes, the hunger, the desperate hope. He recognized that look. He had seen it in Suri's eyes in those early years after her mother died. When Suri would wake up crying in the night, reaching for someone who was no longer there. When she would ask why other children had mothers and she did not. Nira was just a child, a lonely child trapped in a palace of gold and fire, surrounded by power but starved of love. How could he refuse her? "Your Majesty," Do-yeon said slowly, "I did not ask for this. I did not expect this. I am just a mechanic. I fix engines and machines. I am nothing special." The Empress smiled coldly, "Then refuse." "But," Do-yeon continued, his voice growing stronger, "I am also a father, and I know what it means to be chosen by a child. When my daughter was born, she did not choose me because I was powerful or important. She chose me because I was there, because I loved her, because I showed up every single day." He looked at Nira. "Your daughter has chosen me. I do not fully understand why, but I will not refuse a child who is asking for love. That is not something I am capable of doing." The hall erupted again. Shouts and roars filled the air. The Empress raised her claw for silence. "Then you are a fool," she said, "and fools must be tested. Ancient law allows me to set 3 trials for any candidate who is not of royal blood. You will complete these trials. If you fail, you will be executed for contaminating royal bloodlines. If you refuse, you will be executed anyway." Do-yeon felt cold fear run through his body, but he looked at Suri, still held by the guard. He looked at Nira, tears now falling from her purple eyes. "I accept," he said. The Empress stood. "The trials will begin tomorrow. You will face the trial of flame, the trial of strength, and the trial of sacrifice. No human has ever survived even one of these trials. You will die screaming, mechanic, and my daughter will learn the price of foolishness." She turned and walked out of the hall, her dark scales disappearing into the shadows. The guards released Suri, who ran to her father and threw her arms around him. He held her tightly, breathing in the smell of her hair. "Father," she whispered, "are you going to die?" He pulled back and looked into her eyes. "No, my little star, I am going to live. I am going to survive because you need me. And now someone else needs me too." He looked at Neera, who still stood alone in the middle of the great hall. Everyone had left her. No one had stayed to comfort her. She was shaking. Doyun stood up, took Suri's hand and walked over to the princess. He knelt down so that he was at her eye level. "Princess Neera," he said gently, "I do not know if I am the right person. I do not know if I can survive your trials, but I promise you this. No matter what happens, you are not alone anymore. Do you understand?" Neera looked at him, then at Suri, then back at him. She burst into tears and threw her arms around him. It was the first time anyone had hugged her in 200 years. And somewhere in the shadows, watching through a hidden window, Empress Velora saw her daughter embrace a human. She saw the tears. She saw the relief. She felt something stir in her ancient heart, something she had buried long ago. She did not know what to call it anymore. The first trial began at dawn. Park Doyun stood before a massive door made of black metal. Behind him, thousands of Dracori had gathered to watch him die. They sat in stone seats that circled a great arena. Princess Neera sat in a special box near the top, her face pale with worry. Suri sat beside her, holding her claw tightly. Empress Velora sat on her throne above them all. She showed no emotion. "The trial of flame," a priest announced, his old voice echoing across the arena. "The candidate must enter the chamber of fire and survive for 100 heartbeats. The temperature inside matches the surface of a young star. Only those with dragon blood have survived this trial." The great doors opened. Doyun saw nothing but white light and heat so intense that his skin began to burn just from standing near the entrance. He was going to die, he knew that. No human could survive this. But then he remembered something. He was a mechanic. He had spent his whole life solving problems with machines, and he had spent the last 3 days working on Dracori technology. "Wait," he said, turning to the priest. "The rules say I must survive inside. They do not say how I must survive, correct?" The priest looked confused. "Correct. The method is not specified." Doyun nodded. He reached into his work bag and pulled out several tubes and cables. The night before, unable to sleep, he had gathered materials from the repair bay, just in case. He worked quickly, connecting the tubes to his repair suit. The suit had a small cooling system designed to keep workers comfortable during engine repairs. Doyun had modified it. He had added extra coolant from the Dracori ship's own systems, turning his simple work suit into a makeshift heat shield. It would not last long, maybe just long enough. The crowd whispered in confusion. What was the human doing? Doyun sealed his helmet and walked into the chamber of fire. The heat hit him like a hammer. Even with his modifications, he could feel the temperature rising inside his suit. Warning lights flashed in his helmet. The coolant was burning away fast. He closed his eyes and counted. 1, 2, 3. The crowd counted with him, their voices mixing with the roar of the flames. 20, 21, 22. His coolant was running low. Red warnings filled his vision. 50, 51, 52. The suit began to crack. Smoke appeared inside his helmet. 70, 73, 74. He could smell his own hair burning. Pain spread across his arms and back. 90, 91, 92. His legs gave out. He fell to his knees. 98, 99, 100. The doors opened. Cool air rushed in. Guards ran forward and pulled Doyun out of the chamber. His suit was melted in several places. His skin was red and burned, but he was alive. The crowd was silent. Then from somewhere in the back, a single Dracorai began to clap. Others joined. The applause spread like wildfire. Empress Velora's golden eyes narrowed. "The first trial is complete," she said coldly. "Prepare the second." Doctors treated Doyun's burns while workers prepared the arena for the next challenge. Suri ran to her father, tears streaming down her face. "Father, your arms. They will heal, little star. I am okay." Neera approached carefully, her purple eyes filled with guilt. "I am sorry. I did not know the trials would be so cruel. I have done this to you." Doyun smiled through the pain. "You did nothing wrong. You asked for help. That is never wrong." An hour later, Doyun stood in the center of the arena once more. Before him sat a massive stone, black and ancient, covered in carvings of dragons. It was twice his height and weighed more than a small ship. "The trial of strength," the priest announced. "The candidate must move the stone of ages. It has stood in this place for 5,000 years. Many great warriors have pushed it. Few have succeeded." Doyun looked at the stone. He knew he could not move it, not alone, not ever. But the priest had said, the candidate must move the stone. He had not said the candidate must move it alone. Doyun turned to the crowd. "The law says I must move it. Does it say I cannot receive help?" The priest looked at the ancient texts. He frowned. "No, it does not specify." Doyun nodded. He looked up at the gallery where the humans sat. "My friends," he called out, "I have worked beside you for years. I have fixed your ships and taught your children. Now I am asking for your help, not because I am strong, but because we are strong together. That is what it means to be human." For a moment, no one moved. Then Suri stood up. She climbed down from the gallery and walked across the arena. Her small hands pressed against the giant stone. "I will help you, father." Neera stood next. She climbed down and joined them, her golden claws resting on the stone. "And I will help too." Then another human child stood, and another. Parents followed their children. Workers left their seats. Soon, dozens of humans and even a few young Dracorai stood around the stone, their hands and claws pressed against its surface. Together, Doyun said, "On 3, 1, 2, 3. They pushed. At first nothing happened. The stone was too heavy, too old, too stubborn. But then it moved. Just a small amount, less than a finger's width, but it moved. The crowd gasped. The priests checked their books. The law only required movement. It did not specify how much. The second trial was complete. Empress Velora stood up slowly. Her face was unreadable. "The human is clever, but cleverness will not save him from the final trial. The trial of sacrifice requires him to give up what he treasures most. There is no trick that can avoid this." She looked directly at Doyun. "What will you offer, human? Your life, your pride, your possessions?" The arena fell silent. Everyone knew what the Empress wanted. She wanted Doyun to offer Suri, to give up his daughter. That was how the trial had always worked. Candidates offered their greatest treasure to prove their devotion. Doyun looked at Suri, at his little star, his entire world. "I know what you expect me to say," he said quietly. "You expect me to offer my daughter. That is what Dracorai candidates have done for thousands of years." The Empress nodded. "But I will not do that. Suri is not a treasure to be given away. She is a person, a beautiful, precious person, and I will never trade her for anything." Whispers spread through the crowd. Had the human just refused the trial? "Instead," Doyun continued, "I offer something else, something that is truly mine to give." He stepped forward and looked up at Princess Neera. "I offer my time. Every day I have left in this life, I offer my patience, my attention, my guidance. I offer to be there for your daughter, Empress, to teach her what I know, to show her what love looks like, not because it will give me power, not because it will make me rich, but because she needs someone to care about her, and that is what fathers do." He turned back to the Empress. I will give up my career, my home on the station, my comfortable life. I will stay here in a world that does not want me, among people who see me as nothing because your daughter asked me to. That is my sacrifice, not a treasure, but myself." The arena was completely silent. Princess Neera was crying openly now. Suri held her hand. The priests looked at their books. They whispered among themselves. Finally, the oldest priest stepped forward. "The sacrifice is acceptable," he said. "The law states that a candidate must offer what they treasure most. Time, patience, and self are valid offerings. The trial is complete." The crowd erupted. Some cheered, some roared in anger, but it did not matter anymore. Park Do-yeon, the human mechanic, had passed all 3 trials. He had done the impossible. Empress Velora sat very still on her throne. She watched as her daughter ran to the human and embraced him. She watched as the little human girl joined them. She watched this strange family, born from loneliness and courage. And for the first time in 3,000 years, she wondered if she had been wrong about humans. About love. About everything. The ceremony was held at sunset. Golden light poured through the crystal windows of the great temple as Park Do-yeon knelt before the altar. Princess Neera stood beside him, wearing a dress of pure gold. Suri stood on his other side, holding a basket of flowers that the Dracorai used for blessings. The oldest priest spoke ancient words that Do-yeon did not understand, but he understood the meaning. From this day forward he was Neera's sire guardian, her guide, her protector. In the eyes of Dracorai law, something very close to a father. When the ceremony ended, Neera turned to him. Her purple eyes were bright with tears. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for not giving up." Do-yeon smiled and put his hand on her shoulder. "That is what family does. We never give up on each other." But outside the temple, not everyone was happy. 3 warlords stood in the shadows, their yellow eyes burning with rage. Lord Korvax, the largest of them, had been certain he would be selected. He had spent decades planning for this moment, and now a human had stolen his prize. "This cannot stand," he growled. "A human cannot hold power in our empire. We must act." The other warlords nodded. They began to plan. Over the next few weeks, tensions grew across the Dracorai dominion. Some believed that the old ways were best, that humans were beneath them, that Princess Neera had brought shame upon the royal bloodline. Others, especially the younger Dracorai who had worked alongside humans, felt differently. They had seen human kindness firsthand. They had watched human crews risk their lives to save strangers. They had witnessed human families caring for each other in ways that felt strange and beautiful. The empire was divided, and at the center of it all was a mechanic who had never wanted power. Do-yeon tried to focus on his new role. He taught Neera how to fix simple machines. He showed her how to cook human food. He read her stories at night, the same stories he had read to Suri for years. He treated her exactly the same as his own daughter, because to him, she was no different. Neera bloomed like a flower, finally given water. She laughed more. She smiled more. She stopped hiding in dark corners and started playing with Suri in the gardens. The 2 girls became sisters in everything but blood. But the warlords would not wait. One night, Lord Korvax and his followers attacked the station. Dracorai warships surrounded Horizon 7, cutting off all escape routes. Korvax broadcast a message to the Empire. "The Empress has allowed our sacred traditions to be corrupted," he declared. "I hereby challenge her rule. Surrender the human and the traitor princess, and the station will be spared. Refuse, and we will burn it to ash." Empress Velora stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching the enemy ships surround the station. Her claws dug into the metal railing. "He dares," she hissed. "He dares challenge me." An advisor stepped forward. "Majesty, we are outnumbered. If we surrender the human, Korvax will withdraw. The Empire will be saved." Velora said nothing. She stared at the station where her daughter now lived, where she had seen something she thought was impossible. A human holding her daughter while she cried, reading her stories, making her laugh. Giving her everything Velora had failed to give. "No," the Empress said. "Majesty." I said no. "We will not surrender the human. We will not surrender my daughter. Prepare for battle." The advisor stared at her in shock. "But Majesty, the cost." "I have ruled this empire for 3,000 years by being cold and strong, by sacrificing everything for power. And what has it given me? An empire that obeys me out of fear, a daughter who flinches when I enter the room, a heart so empty I forgot what warmth felt like." She turned to face her officers. "That human taught my daughter to smile. He taught her that she is worthy of love, and for that I would burn 1,000 rebels." The battle began. Dracorai ships clashed in the void around the station. Fire and metal filled the empty space. On the station itself, Doyun gathered all the humans into the central shelter. He held Suri close. Nira stood beside them, shaking with fear. "I am sorry," she whispered. "This is my fault. All of this is my fault." Doyun shook his head. "No, this is the fault of people who cannot accept change, who are so scared of love that they would rather destroy than understand." The station shook as a warship exploded nearby. Suri buried her face in her father's chest. "Father," she said, "are we going to die?" Doyun looked at his daughter, at Nira, at all the frightened humans huddled in the shelter. "No," he said, "we are going to live because we have something worth living for." The battle raged for hours, but slowly the Empress's loyal forces gained the advantage. Young Dracorai warriors who had worked with humans fought with extra fury. They were not just fighting for their Empress. They were fighting for a new idea. The idea that strength could come from kindness, that power did not require cruelty. Finally, Lord Corvax's flagship was destroyed. The rebellion was over. That night, Empress Velora came to the station. She walked through the damaged corridors past wounded soldiers and crying children. Guards tried to clear a path for her, but she waved them away. She did not want ceremony. She wanted something else. She found them in a small medical bay. Doyun sat on a bed while a doctor treated a cut on his arm. Suri slept on a chair nearby, exhausted from the long day. And Nira sat beside her human guardian, holding his hand. Velora stopped in the doorway. She did not know what to say. Doyun looked up and saw her. Carefully he stood and bowed. "Your Majesty." "You stayed," Velora said quietly. "When the attack came, you could have hidden. You could have tried to escape. But you gathered the humans and kept them safe. You protected my daughter." "I did what any father would do." Velora looked at Nira. Her daughter, who had never looked at her with anything but fear, was now looking at the human with complete trust and love. Something broke inside the Empress. Something old and cold that had been building for millennia. "I do not understand you," she said to Doyun. "I do not understand how you can give so much and ask for nothing, how you can love without conditions, how you can be so weak and yet so strong." Doyun smiled gently. "It is not complicated, Majesty. Love is not about understanding. It is about showing up every day, even when it is hard, especially when it is hard." Velora was silent for a long moment. Then she turned to Nira. "I have been a poor mother," she said. "I have given you everything except what you needed most. I do not know if I can change. I do not know if it is too late, but I would like to try, if you will let me." Nira stared at her mother. She had waited 200 years to hear those words. "It is not too late," she whispered. "It is never too late." Velora stepped forward. Slowly, carefully, like she was learning something for the first time, she opened her arms. And Nira ran into them. They stood there, mother and daughter, holding each other in a way they never had before. Doyun watched with tears in his eyes. Suri woke up and saw them and smiled. The empire would change after that day, not quickly, Not easily, but the change had begun. Princess Nira stayed on Horizon 7 under Doyun's guardianship. It was the first time a Dracorai royal had lived among humans. She learned to fix engines with her guardian. She learned to cook with Suri. She learned that love did not require palaces or power. Empress Velora visited often. At first, she did not know how to act, but Doyun taught her the same way he taught everyone, with patience and kindness. She learned to sit beside Nira's bed at night. She learned to ask about her day. She learned to say 3 words she had never said before, words that felt strange in her ancient mouth, words that human children heard every day without knowing how precious they were. I love you. And across the stars the story spread. The story of a human mechanic who had won the heart of a dragon princess, not through strength or cunning or power, but through the simple, stubborn act of caring. Humanity's greatest weapon, the universe began to realize, was not technology or ambition. It was love. And it was changing everything. Suri was right, Doyun thought as he watched Nira and Velora walk through the station garden together. The princess really was brave. But more importantly, she had been willing to believe that a better life was possible, that she deserved to be loved, that a lonely mechanic and his daughter could give her something that an entire empire could not. And she had been right. They all had been right. Family was not about blood or species or tradition. It was about the people who chose to stay, who chose to care, who chose to love even when it was hard. And that was the most human thing of all.